Most gardeners waste half their season replanting things that didn't need to die in the first place. Here's what nobody tells you when you start out. Some of the most productive food plants you'll ever grow only need to go in the ground once. After that, they come back, season after season, with almost no help from you. In this video, I'm giving you 10 crops that reward patience and punish neglect of the calendar. A couple of them will flat out surprise you, and one of them, most home gardeners completely overlook, even though it outproduces almost everything else in the garden. I've grown these through more seasons than I can count. Let's get into it. 1. Asparagus. Asparagus is the test of whether you're a gardener or just someone who gardens occasionally. It takes 2 to 3 years before you pull your first real harvest. And that's the part that scares people off. But here's what those people miss. Once it's established, a single bed produces for 20, sometimes 30 years. I've got crowns in the ground that were there before I started keeping records. Beginners make the mistake of planting from seed. Don't buy 2-year-old crowns. You cut a year off the weight immediately. Plant them in a dedicated bed, 12 inches apart, in trenches about 8 inches deep. Full sun, good drainage, leave them completely alone that first season. Don't harvest a single spear. Let the plant build its root system. The reward comes later, and when it comes every spring without you lifting a finger to replant. Now this next one is something most people only think of as a garnish, but treat it right, and it'll feed you for a decade. 2. A rhubarb. Rhubarb is one of the most underused perennial crops in the home garden. People see it as a pie ingredient. What it actually is a low-maintenance, cold-hardy producer that comes back harder every year. Plant it once in rich, well-drained soil and partial to full sun. Divide the crowns every 4 or 5 years to keep production strong. That's essentially your entire maintenance schedule. The mistake beginners make is harvesting too heavily in year 1. Pull no more than a third of the stalks in the first season. Let the plant establish. By year 3, you can harvest freely and it won't slow down. One practical note: never eat the leaves. They're toxic, stalks only. Cut them at the base, not partway up the stem. Most gardeners skip what comes next because they think it's complicated. It isn't. 3. As Jerusalem artichoke. This one produces more food per square foot than almost anything else I've grown, and it requires almost nothing from you. Jerusalem artichokes are not artichokes. They're a sunflower relative. You plant the tubers in spring, they grow 6 to 10 feet tall, flower in late summer, and when the tops die back in fall, you dig up more tubers than you put in. Leave a few in the ground. They'll come back next year on their own. In fact, containing them is more of a concern than growing them. They spread. Give them a dedicated bed or a spot where spreading won't be a problem. They're drought-tolerant. They handle poor soil. They're about as close to a self-sufficient crop as you'll find. The tubers taste similar to water chestnuts when raw, nutty when roasted, high in prebiotic fiber, and the yield is remarkable. Here's where beginners go wrong with the next one. They plant it too late and wonder why production stops in summer. 4. Sorrel. Sorrel is a perennial green that comes back every spring before almost anything else in the garden is ready. That early production window is exactly why it earns its space. The flavor is sharp, lemony, acidic, excellent in salads, soups, sauces. It handles light frost without complaint. In warmer climates, it barely goes dormant at all. Plant it in a permanent spot. Full sun to partial shade. Once established, it self-maintains almost completely. Cut it back after it bolts in heat and it regrows from the base. The beginner mistake is planting it in full summer and expecting tender leaves. Sorrel produces best in cool weather. Spring and fall are your prime harvest windows. In midsummer heat, let it rest. One plant becomes a reliable patch within 2 seasons. Start with 3 or 4 plants and you'll have more than you need. Next up is one that most water-conscious gardeners have started growing specifically because it handles dry conditions better than almost anything else. 5. Artichoke globe. Artichokes are perennial in zones 7 and warmer. In colder climates, they're grown as annuals, but in the right zone, one plant produces for years. A mature artichoke plant is striking. 4 to 5 feet tall, silvery green leaves, architectural in the garden. But the real value is the harvest. Each plant produces multiple buds per season, and production improves after the first year. Plant in full sun with good drainage. Give each plant 4 to 5 feet of space. They get large. Cut back the spent stalks after harvest and mulch, heavily going into winter in marginal zones. The flavor of a homegrown artichoke pulled at the right moment, tight bud, heavy for its size, is in a different category from anything you'll find at a grocery store. This next one surprised me the first time I grew it properly. Most gardeners don't give it enough room to do what it actually wants to do. 6. Horseradish. Horseradish is essentially unkillable, and that's both its strength and the one warning worth mentioning. Plant the root cuttings once, water them in, walk away. By fall, you're digging roots. Leave any piece of root in the ground and it returns the following spring, guaranteed. This is a crop for a permanent corner of the garden. It doesn't play well with neighbours if allowed to spread freely, so give it a contained bed or a spot where you don't mind it coming back. Harvest in fall after a frost or two. The cold improves the flavour. Scrub the roots, grate them, mix with vinegar. That's it. Potent, fresh, nothing like the jarred product. Drought-tolerant, pest-resistant, no replanting, it checks every box. Harder to kill than you'd expect, and the next one is the same story. 7. Lovage is celery you plant once and never babysit again. It grows 6 feet tall in good conditions. Every part of it is edible. Leaves, stems, seeds, and it tastes strongly of celery, with a deeper, more complex edge. Use it anywhere you'd use celery, but in smaller amounts because the flavour is concentrated. It's cold hardy, drought tolerant once established, and comes back reliably every spring. One plant is usually enough for a household. Plant it in a permanent spot with full sun and reasonable moisture the first season. After that, it handles dry stretches without complaint. Most gardeners have never heard of it. That's a gap worth closing. Now this next one is specifically for gardeners who are tired of fighting pests. It wins that battle on its own. 8. Egyptian walking onion. Standard onions require replanting every year. Egyptian walking onions do not. They produce small bulblets at the top of the plant. Those bulblets eventually bend the stem to the ground under their weight. Plant themselves, and the colony slowly walks across the bed. That's where the name comes from. Harvest the greens like scallions in spring. Use the small topset bulblets like pearl onions. Leave enough in place and the bed self-perpetuates indefinitely. They're cold hardy down to zone 3, are pest resistant, productive. And once you have a patch established, you never buy onion sets again. Plant the top set bulblets in fall for best results. 6 inches apart. They'll establish over winter and push early growth in spring. Most gardeners overlook this next one entirely, which is a mistake because it produces more calories per square foot than almost anything else that comes back on its own. 9. Good King Henry. Good King Henry is an old kitchen garden perennial that largely disappeared from home gardens and doesn't deserve the obscurity. Young leaves and shoots are used like spinach in spring. The plant produces for years. It tolerates partial shade, which makes it useful in spots where other crops struggle. It's cold hardy, drought tolerant once established, and essentially pest-free. Plant it in well-drained soil with decent organic matter. It takes a season to really establish. Then it becomes a reliable spring green producer year after year. This is the kind of crop that rewards gardeners who think in terms of long-term productivity rather than just this season's harvest. One more, and this one closes the list because it earns its place in every climate and every size of garden. 10. Chives. Chives are the most underestimated perennial in the kitchen garden. They come back every spring without fail. They flower in early summer. Those flowers are edible, mildly onion-flavored, and useful in cooking. The plant clumps and expands slowly. Divide every few years to keep it vigorous. Full sun or partial shade. Drought-tolerant. No serious pest or disease problems. You can cut them to the ground and they regrow. Should grow garlic chives alongside regular chives. Different flavor profile, slightly later season, and equally reliable. One clump becomes your permanent onion flavor source. It doesn't need coddling, it doesn't need annual replanting. It just comes back, season after season, and does exactly what you need it to do. 10 crops. Plant them once, manage them minimally, and they feed you for years. That's not a shortcut. That's building a garden that works the way a productive garden should. Which one of these are you putting in the ground first? Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you want more practical, no-nonsense gardening content like this, subscribe. That's exactly what I make.